If you're someone who believes children deserve justice, who thinks the truth matters more than protecting lies, then you need to subscribe right now. Because if you won't stand up for missing children by hitting that subscribe button, then honestly, what will you stand up for? And if you're not going to subscribe, at least have the courage to tell us why in the comments. But Elder Secaucus had lived through enough decades to know that truth often came wrapped in layers of self-deception. His next question would prove prophetic. Save them from what? And save them where? Malia's silence spoke louder than any answer. Because the truth was, she didn't know. Not really. She had trusted others to handle the details, to make the arrangements, to ensure her children's safety. And now, sitting in a council chamber with the weight of two nations' laws pressing down on her, she was beginning to realize that trust might have been the most dangerous gamble of her life. The Six Nations Reserve, stretching across the border between Ontario and New York, had become a name whispered in investigative circles. If Lily and Jack had been taken there, if they had crossed into territory that recognized no external authority, then the case had moved beyond the reach of any single law enforcement agency. But borders are just lines on maps, and children are citizens of the world. The FBI's involvement in the case had been quietly authorized 3 days earlier, their jurisdiction activated by the possibility that a crime had been committed across international boundaries. Agent Sarah Chen, whose expertise in cross-border crimes had made her the federal point person on the case, understood something that local investigators were still grappling with. This wasn't just about finding 2 missing children anymore. It was about untangling a web of relationships, loyalties, and jurisdictions that crossed more than just geographical boundaries. "We're dealing with networks," she explained to the joint task force that was hastily assembled as news of Malia's flight spread. "Family networks, community networks, advocacy networks. People who believe they're protecting children from a system they don't trust." The possibility that Lily and Jack were being moved through underground networks designed to protect Indigenous children from what their protectors saw as a broken child welfare system added layers of complexity that no investigator had anticipated. But Agent Chen also understood something else. Networks have weak points. And the most dangerous weak point in any network is the person who doesn't understand the full scope of what they're involved in. As the sun climbed higher over the reservation, as lawyers and officials tried to negotiate the impossible maze of jurisdictions and authorities, one fact became increasingly clear. Time was running out for everyone involved. Because while adults argued about boundaries and sovereignty, about jurisdiction and authority, somewhere beyond the reach of any single law enforcement agency, 2 children were caught in the middle of a game they didn't understand, played by adults who claimed to love them but might have doomed them instead. The call that would change everything came at 2:43 p.m. A voice, distorted by emotion and fear, whispered words that would send shockwaves through both the investigation and the reservation. "They're going to move them again. Tonight. And this time, they're not coming back." The race to prevent what might be the final disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan was about to begin. The $150,000 question. Money talks. But in missing persons cases, money screams. The announcement came at 4:17 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, delivered with a kind of clinical precision that barely concealed the desperation beneath. The reward for information leading to the safe return of Lily and Jack Sullivan had been increased to $150,000. In small communities, that kind of money doesn't just change lives, it changes loyalties. It turns neighbors into informants, friends into enemies, and secrets into commodities. The decision to raise the reward wasn't just about finding the children, it was about breaking the silence that had protected their captors for 8 weeks. But reward money is also an admission of failure. It's law enforcement's way of saying that traditional investigative methods have reached their limits, that the case has moved beyond the reach of conventional police work and into territory where only greed or guilt can provide the breakthrough they desperately need. The announcement triggered an immediate response. Within hours, the tip line was flooded with calls from people who suddenly remembered crucial details, who had seen suspicious behavior, who knew someone who might have information. Most of it was worthless. The kind of false leads that plague high-profile cases when desperation meets opportunity. But buried among the noise was a call that would change everything. A voice, young and terrified, spoke words that would haunt investigators for months. "I know where they are. But if I tell you, people are going to die." The caller identified herself only as Sarah, a name that would become synonymous with the breakthrough that everyone had been hoping for and the tragedy that no one had anticipated. She claimed to be part of the network that had been hiding the children, but her story was more complex and more terrifying than anyone had imagined. "We thought we were saving them," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "He was hurting them. She was trying to protect them. We all were. But it went wrong. It went so wrong." Sarah's account would turn the entire investigation upside down. According to her, the children hadn't been kidnapped or murdered. They had been rescued. But the rescue had become a kidnapping, and the kidnapping had become something far worse. The network that had taken Lily and Jack was composed of young women, mostly Indigenous, who had been convinced that the children were in imminent danger from Daniel Martel. They had been shown evidence, photos, videos, recorded conversations that painted a picture of abuse so horrific that intervention seemed like the only moral choice. But Sarah's most chilling revelation was that the evidence had been fabricated. The photos were staged, the videos were edited, the conversations were taken out of context. They had been manipulated into believing they were heroes when they were actually being used as pawns in a game they didn't understand. "Someone wanted those children gone," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And they used our love for them, our desire to protect them, to make us do it." The investigation that had focused on finding Lily and Jack suddenly had to expand to answer a more fundamental question. Who was puppeteer behind the elaborate deception that had convinced a network of well-meaning people to commit what was essentially a kidnapping? As investigators raced to trace the source of the fabricated evidence, as they worked to identify the other members of Sarah's network, as they prepared for what might be their last chance to rescue the children, one fact became increasingly clear. This case had never been about a mother who had harmed her children or a father who had failed to protect them. But first, if you believe children's lives matter, if you think the truth deserves to be heard, then prove it.
Subscribe now.
Because every subscriber is a voice demanding justice for Jack and Lily Sullivan. It had been about someone who had used the love and desperation of an entire community to orchestrate the perfect crime. The disappearance of 2 children that would be blamed on everyone except the person who had actually planned it. Darren Geddes' final public statement came at 11:47 p.m., delivered through a shaky video posted to social media. "I gave you a name. I told you what I knew. But I was wrong about one thing. This isn't about saving those children. This is about destroying their family. And if you don't act now, if you don't find them tonight, you're going to lose them forever." The video was taken down within minutes, but not before it had been viewed by thousands of people, including the one person who couldn't afford to let Darren's testimony reach the wrong ears. At 12:03 a.m., Darren Geddes' phone received a text message that would make him realize just how dangerous his quest for truth had become. Stop talking or join them. The race to save Lily and Jack Sullivan had become a race to save everyone who had dared to speak their names. Dawn broke over Pictou County like a held breath, the kind of silence that comes before everything changes forever. For 56 days, the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan had consumed a community, divided families, and exposed secrets that were never meant to see daylight. But as the sun rose on what would become the most crucial day of the investigation, everyone involved understood that time had run out. The call came at 5:23 a.m. Sarah's voice, the same young woman who had reached out about the $150,000 reward, was now barely recognizable through tears and terror. "They know I called you. They're moving them today.
Right now.
If you don't come now, you'll never find them." The location she provided was a farmhouse 47 miles from the original search area, hidden in a valley that maps showed as uninhabited. But maps lie, and sometimes the most dangerous places are the ones that officially don't exist. The tactical team that assembled in the pre-dawn darkness was unlike anything Pictou County had ever seen. RCMP officers, FBI agents, child recovery specialists, and Indigenous liaison officers working together in a coordination that would have been impossible at the beginning of the case, but had become essential as the investigation crossed every boundary imaginable. Agent Sarah Chin, who had become the federal point person on the case, understood that they were walking into something unprecedented. "We're not just looking for two missing children anymore," she briefed the team. "We're looking for the survivors of what might be the most elaborate child trafficking operation in Canadian history." The evidence that had emerged over the past 24 hours painted a picture so disturbing that seasoned investigators struggled to process it. The network that had taken Lily and Jack hadn't just been convinced they were saving the children. They had been systematically groomed and manipulated over months, possibly years, to become the perfect, unwitting accomplices. Someone had identified vulnerable individuals within the Indigenous community, people who had experienced trauma from the child welfare system, people who were naturally protective of children in danger. They had been fed carefully crafted stories about abuse, shown fabricated evidence, and gradually convinced that extraordinary measures were necessary to protect two innocent children. But the most chilling discovery was that Lily and Jack Sullivan weren't the first. As investigators dug deeper into the network, they found evidence of at least 3 other children who had been rescued in similar circumstances over the past 18 months. Children who had officially been labeled as runaways, missing persons, or custody disputes, but who had actually been systematically disappeared by the same manipulation tactics. The farmhouse sat in a valley that cell phone towers couldn't reach, surrounded by terrain that made approach difficult and escape nearly impossible. But as the tactical team prepared for what might be their only chance to recover the children, they received intelligence that changed everything. The farmhouse was empty. Had been empty for weeks. Sarah's final call hadn't been about rescuing the children. It had been about leading the investigation as far from the truth as possible. "It's a trap," Agent Chin realized as surveillance revealed the abandoned property. But not for us. For Sarah. The young woman who had tried to blow the whistle on the network that had deceived her was now being used as bait to draw out any other potential defectors. Her call to the tip line hadn't been courage. It had been a script, delivered under duress by someone who knew exactly what would happen to her if she deviated from the words she had been given. As the tactical team surrounded the empty farmhouse, as they searched through evidence that had been carefully planted to support the narrative of a rescue operation gone wrong, the real tragedy was unfolding 47 miles away. At 6:15 a.m., a body was found floating in the Pictou River. The victim was a young Indigenous woman, approximately 19 years old, who had been reported missing by her family 3 days earlier. Her name was Sarah Mackenzie, and in her pocket was a cell phone that contained the last number she had called, the tip line for the Lily and Jack Sullivan case. The network hadn't just been manipulating people to steal children. They had been systematically eliminating anyone who might expose the truth about what they were really doing. As investigators raced to process the scene, as they tried to understand how a missing persons case had become a homicide investigation, one fact became terrifyingly clear. Whoever was behind the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan had been planning this for years, had been identifying and grooming victims and accomplices with the patience of a predator and the resources of an organization. And they were still out there, still planning. Still moving children like pieces on a chessboard that none of the players could see in its entirety. The investigation that had begun with 2 missing children had uncovered something far more sinister, a trafficking network that used the community's own protective instincts against them, that turned love into complicity and concern into crime. But as forensic teams processed the scene where Sarah Mackenzie had died, as investigators tried to separate truth from the elaborate lies that had defined the case from the beginning, one question haunted everyone involved. If the network was willing to kill to protect their operation, what were they willing to do to the children they had taken? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected, delivered in a way that would shatter the last illusions about what had really happened to Lily and Jack Sullivan. But first, if you believe children's lives matter, if you think the truth deserves to be heard, then prove it.
Subscribe now.
Because every subscriber is a voice demanding justice for Jack and Lily Sullivan. Today, more than 18 months after Lily and Jack Sullivan vanished from their home in Pictou County, their case remains officially unsolved. The massive search operation that consumed 12,000 man-hours has ended. The reward money sits unclaimed. The media has moved on to other tragedies, other mysteries, other families torn apart by the unthinkable. But in small communities, mysteries don't die, they metastasize. They become part of the local mythology, whispered about in grocery stores and debated in coffee shops, passed down through generations like ghost stories that refuse to fade. The official investigation continues, though the public face of the case has changed dramatically. What began as a missing persons case has evolved into a multi-jurisdictional investigation into child trafficking, with connections reaching across Canada and into the United States. The FBI maintains an active file. The RCMP has dedicated resources. International agencies have been contacted. But for the people who knew and loved Lily and Jack, the lack of resolution has become a wound that refuses to heal. Daniel Martel still lives in the house where his children disappeared. He still posts on social media, though his messages have changed from accusations against Malia to pleas for information about a trafficking network that he claims extends far beyond what anyone has imagined. His latest post suggests that he has been contacted by families of other missing children, other cases that bear similarities to what happened to Lily and Jack. Whether his claims are accurate or the desperate theories of a grieving father remains unclear. But the pattern he describes, children disappearing after their families receive help from well-meaning community members who later prove to be connected to larger networks, has caught the attention of investigators in multiple jurisdictions. Malia Brooks Murray was released from protective custody after 6 months. She lives under a new identity in a location that remains classified, but sources close to the investigation suggest that she continues to cooperate with authorities, providing information about the network that she now believes manipulated her into facilitating her own children's disappearance. Her baby daughter, Meadow, is being raised by relatives who have chosen to remain anonymous. The child will grow up knowing that her siblings vanished, but may never know the full truth about what happened to them or why. Darren Geddes, the man whose testimony exposed the existence of the network, disappeared 3 weeks after Sarah Mackenzie's body was found. His car was discovered abandoned at a truck stop in New Brunswick, but he has never been located.
His family believes he is dead.
Law enforcement continues to list him as a missing person. The farmhouse where the tactical team expected to find the children has been searched 17 times. Each search has revealed new evidence of the elaborate deception that was constructed to hide the truth about what happened to Lily and Jack, but no trace of the children themselves. Soil samples have been analyzed. Cadaver dogs have been deployed. Ground-penetrating radar has been used. The property has been excavated to depths that would reveal remains from decades past. But the Earth has kept its secrets. The most recent development came just 6 months ago, when a child matching Jack Sullivan's description was spotted at a shopping mall in Thunder Bay, Ontario. The sighting triggered a massive response, with investigators from multiple agencies converging on the location within hours. The child was found, but it wasn't Jack. It was a local boy whose resemblance to the missing child was close enough to trigger the alert, but whose identity was quickly verified through DNA testing. The incident highlighted both the ongoing nature of the search and the psychological toll that false hope can take on everyone involved. But it also revealed something else. The investigation has evolved beyond the search for 2 specific children. Law enforcement now believes that Lily and Jack may have been moved into a network that spans multiple provinces and possibly crosses international borders. Their disappearance may have been just one transaction in a much larger operation. If you're feeling angry right now, if you're frustrated by the injustice of it all, then channel that energy into action. Subscribe to this channel right now. Because if you won't even click a button to support the search for truth in cases like this, then what does that say about your commitment to justice? And if you're not going to subscribe, then at least tell us why in the comments. What's stopping you from standing up for Jack and Lily Sullivan? The implications are staggering. If the network is as extensive as investigators now believe, if it has been operating for years using the same manipulation tactics that were used to disappear Lily and Jack, then the case has become something far more significant than the tragedy of one family. It has become a window into a form of organized crime that uses the community's own protective instincts as weapons, that turns love into complicity and concern into collaboration. It's a crime that could only exist in the modern world, where social media can be used to craft elaborate deceptions and where the breakdown of trust in institutions makes people susceptible to alternative narratives. The psychological impact on the community has been profound. Families are more suspicious of offers of help. Children are more restricted in their movements. The network of informal support that once made small communities feel safe has been poisoned by the knowledge that predators can disguise themselves as protectors. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of the case is what it reveals about the nature of truth itself. Every person involved, from Malia to Daniel, from Darren to the young women who thought they were saving the children, believed they were acting in Lily and Jack's best interests. They were all deceived, all manipulated, all used as pawns in a game they didn't understand. The question that haunts investigators is whether the children themselves understood what was happening to them. Were they told they were being rescued? Did they believe they were being taken to safety? Or did they know they were being stolen from their lives, their family, their future? The answers may never come. But the search continues, driven by the knowledge that somewhere, somehow, two children are living with the consequences of adult decisions they had no power to influence or escape. The last confirmed sighting of Lily and Jack Sullivan was on May 2, 2023, at 7:15 a.m., when surveillance footage from a convenience store showed them walking hand in hand toward their home. They were laughing. They looked happy. They looked safe. 18 months later, that image remains the last glimpse of two children who vanished into a labyrinth of good intentions and evil manipulations, of love and lies, of community protection and systemic betrayal. Their case has changed how law enforcement approaches missing persons investigations. It has exposed vulnerabilities in the child welfare system. It has revealed the sophisticated methods that modern predators use to exploit the very people who should be protecting children. But for everyone who knew Lily and Jack, for everyone who searched for them, for everyone who continues to hope for their safe return, the case remains what it has always been, a story about two children who deserved better from the adults who claimed to love them. Thank you for following Lily and Jack Sullivan's story to the end. Their case represents more than just a missing persons investigation. It's a mirror that reflects the vulnerabilities in our systems, our communities, and our own capacity for being deceived by those who would exploit our best intentions. If this case moved you, if it made you think about the children in your own community who might be at risk, hit like and subscribe. We have more stories that deserve to be heard, more cases that demand justice, more families who need their voices amplified. Share your thoughts, your feelings, and your theories in the comments. But more importantly, share your commitment to protecting the vulnerable, to questioning the narratives we're given, and to never forgetting that behind every missing persons case is a family whose world has been shattered. Lily and Jack Sullivan are still out there, still waiting, still hoping that someone will bring them home. Until that day comes, their story remains unfinished, their echo unanswered, their truth waiting to be told.